Hi, good afternoon everyone. My name is Sam and I'm going to be doing the webinar on cloud hosting. Before I start the webinar, I just want to do a bit of a mic test to see all you guys can actually listen into me. Thanks, Wendy. Thanks, Cindy. Okay, great. What we're going to do today is the next 60 minutes, I'm going to talk about cloud computing and cloud hosting in specific. There's a lot of talk about providers talking about your business should be on the cloud and so on. So what I might try to do today is to talk about what is actually cloud hosting, what is cloud computing, and what you need to know, and how was it important to your business. Unlike my other webinars where I had a lot of information to share in terms of tools and so on, with this webinar it's more about having a better understanding about what is cloud computing, is it important to your business, what are the things you got to look at when you launch your business, whether it's online or whether it's your website, your CRM system, and so on. So let's look at what does cloud really mean in very simple terms. There's a lot of talk about cloud in various IT magazines, webinars, seminars, and so on, but most businesses still don't understand what is cloud and how does it really affect their business. There's been a slight delay with the next slide. Can everyone still listening to me? Okay, thanks. I guess one of the advantages of being a cloud is that we won't have this situation that I'm having at the moment where my slides are taking a slightly longer time to load up. I might just restart this presentation so that it should reset the issue that I have. Sorry about that. Okay, wonderful. So we're back. So let's try to understand what exactly cloud computing is. Are you all everyone able to see my presentation now, or it's still stuck with the agenda? Okay, wonderful. So let's look at in very simple terms, let's say, you moved into a new city, you're moving to a new city, and the first thing that you want to know is where would you live? Okay. So when you're looking at settling in, there are two options to look at, what you can do with where do you want to stay. You can either go and say you want to build a house, or the other option is to say you would like to rent an apartment. Okay, now from a now if you look at building a house, for instance, what would happen with building a house is you would need to basically buy some land, hire a builder, a lot of decisions to be made, where you should buy a land, or what kind of builder you got to use, or do you need a single story, a double story kind of stuff. So but the good thing about building a house is you have the option, you can really customize it the way you want it. So if you have a specific way of looking at it, you could decide on how big you want the house to be, how many bedrooms you want. Do you want a one-story house, do you want a two-story house, and so on. So the benefits with building a house is you've got that flexibility. You can decide on what you want for whether you want timber floors, whether you want carpets, or what kind of lighting you want, and so on. So the advantage is that once you build a house, you basically build what you like. But the challenge is then you have to make sure that you're doing the landscaping. You got to pay for your your utility bills, your electricity, your water, council services, and so on. So apart from the cost of building a house, you also are paying for what you call as ongoing maintenance and so on. Now, whether you go on a vacation or whatever, you still have to pay. But on the other hand, if you look at renting, it's a bit different. With renting, it's quite simple. You can go and say, okay, I want to rent in a certain suburb. So you can go on to realestate.com.au or or domain.com.au and have a look at what are the other options that are there. So uh, again, with renting, you've got an option. You can go and say, I want to rent a 2-bedroom apartment, I want to rent a 3-bedroom apartment, or whatever it is. So you can you can rent an apartment which could be either 2, 3, 4 bedrooms and such. Now, the challenge, however, with renting is that one is that you don't have to make a lot of decisions. It's quite simple. And the great thing is that you could rent an apartment which is, let's say, 3 bedrooms today, and in 6 months down the track you can downsize yourself, or add another bedroom if you need to. It gives you a lot of flexibility, which you can't do when you build a house. Once you build a house, you're kind of stuck with it, and unless you want to spend a lot of money and do further extensions and renovations. The other problem with renting also is that you can't really customize it. So the way it is, you got to stay out there. At the most, you can add some more furniture, do a bit of interior, but that's about it. Okay. Now, what happens is that today, however, when you're renting apartments, okay, most of the apartments would come with the best kind of infrastructure. Most of them would have a built-in a washing machine, a dryer, and so on. So when you with internet connections, some of them come with internet connections and so on. So the advantage of renting a place is that you don't have to take a lot of decisions. Okay, you don't have to worry about maintenance costs. You don't have to worry about the landscaping cost and so on. And the good thing is that that's basically you pay your rent on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, the way you go, and you just pay for your normal utility bills and so on. So most people then decide on which is a better option. Should I rent a house, or should I maybe build a house? And sometimes what we tend to do is, when you move to a new city, is we would tend to rent for a couple of months, decide on which suburb is the right suburb to live in, and then finally you go and maybe build a house. So we talked about an example. Now let's look at what actually happens. What does it relate to cloud computing? I mean, what is the similarity between cloud computing and this thing? Now, most of you all are actually used to using things like Gmail or Facebook and YouTube and all those things. So this is exactly what these are, applications which are sitting on a cloud. So you normally would access it using an internet browser or internet connection. So cloud computing is nothing new. It's been there for quite some time. The only thing is that we've been using it without really understanding how the whole thing works. So take something like Facebook. The amount of visitors that are there, or the amount of people who access Facebook, okay, is amazingly high. But you very rarely you'll find that there's a issue with the speed in which Facebook opens up. Okay, so what Facebook has done is basically they have hosted their application on a cloud, and because of that you get the best experience. You don't have to worry whether there are 500,000 people accessing the same part of Facebook at the same time or whatever. It doesn't make a difference. There are so many websites or so many applications that you can actually go online and play. So you can imagine that there's so much of activities that can happen on a website or an application, but because it's on a cloud, okay, it's good for you. And the greatest thing, I guess, is whether you take Facebook or Gmail, everything's free, So the next thing you got to think about, why would someone like Hotmail or Gmail or Facebook, why are they giving us those information for free? There is an investment that's done. Okay, so what is the downside of it? What are you paying them actually? Okay, what we don't realize is that we use all these free softwares online and all this stuff. In return, what we're doing is we're literally giving away our information to them. So things like Facebook today, Facebook has been free. You don't pay anything for Facebook. But, and this is how Facebook started off, So when Facebook started off a couple of years back, it's all about building up a community. Now that they've got so many millions of subscribers online, now is the time where they started to make money. The way they make money is that they use your information and they actually start targeting you with qualified ads. It's like if you have a profile, and in your profile you love to do water ski or water sports, what you'll realize today is that every time you go onto Facebook, you're having a conversation with someone or you're sharing something, on the right hand side you actually see ads which are relevant to your your selection or your profile. And that's what's happening, So if someone is giving you something for free on a cloud, there is something that you're giving away. Now, imagine if you go and tell that to someone who owns a business, go and tell to a large organization, So you're getting all this thing for free, okay? You're enjoying, quick service on Facebook, Gmail, and all this stuff, You're connecting to all your friends for free. You don't have to pay anything. The only thing you pay for is your internet connection. So, but what's happening is that you're actually giving away your information for free to get that free service from Gmail and all those stuff. Now imagine if you were a business owner and if someone comes and says, okay, can you if you give me all your customer details, I'm happy to give you a product. What would a business owner react? It's like someone coming up to you, give me your entire customer base, and give me all your contacts, okay? And what I want to do is, to all your customers, I want to give them a free service, okay? Now, for most businesses today, your customer base is very critical, okay? You don't want to share your customer base with someone else because you don't know, whether it'll land up on your competitor's, computer or whatever it is. So these are one of the challenges today, where we go and adapt to new technology, but we don't really understand, what is the level of security we have and so on. And I think this is what it is. Most businesses today says, I want to have a system which is really secure, which is, which totally, within my network, highly reliable and so on. That's what most businesses want. Okay, everyone tries to build up a in-house CRM system which is extremely secured, customized. None of your staff, when they move away, can take any information off from your your company information and all those things. With most small businesses today, the most critical application that they use is their accounting system. And frankly speaking, still a large percentage of people still prefer to have their accounting software within their office network. They don't want to put that on a cloud. Okay, but at the same time, if you realize that most of your banking that you do, whether you're with Westpac or CBA or whatever it is, your information is anyway on the cloud. It's not that it's on their local computer. The only difference with the banks is they don't use what you call as a public cloud. They have their own private cloud, which tends to be more secured than a general public cloud. So if you're a small business, or if you're a business grower, you will always think about saying, I need to have my own in-house database. I need to have my own accounting system. I need to have my inventory control and all those things. Now, when you're doing that, you definitely are increasing your overheads. So you got to worry about the technology, the support, the cost of support, the cost of software updates, and so on. So when you look at all those factors, then what you realize is that the cost that you would invest in, will increase, further on. And not only that, it's like all your data is sitting within your office. Tomorrow, if something happens, within your office, you've lost all that information. And this is why slowly now businesses are thinking about, let's take our information out of our office environment. Let's put that in a data center. And we're going through a very slow, gradual phase. We are going through putting certain parts of our information on the web, not all of them. Okay, the first step for us to go outside our office environment was a website, where we build up a website, put that on a web, and let customers react to it. Now, from that stage onwards, we are not only moving our website, but now we're talking about having a web-based CRM system like Salesforce.com. One of the most popular CRM systems is a web-based system. Accounting systems are going on the cloud. By doing that, you actually are saving a lot of money and a lot of time and resources. But at the same time, what happens is that, if for some reason things go backwards, let's say if there's a recession, okay, the first thing when you hit recession you do is you cut off your advertising spend, and you tend to basically reduce your IT spend, or lay off people and all this stuff. Now imagine if you have invested in your internal network and something like that happens. It's kind of very difficult for you to let go of your IT person or reduce the servers you have and so on. And I guess that's where now cloud computing is helping out, because all that investment that you would have done within your office, okay, will be taken care by cloud computing. Now, but having said that, again, cloud computing is not an answer for everything, because nowadays, everyone says, I want to be in the cloud, but you got to understand what part of your business can go on the cloud. What cloud computing can do is it can simplify your life. It can make things much more easier. Okay, so what happens is, rather than you spending a lot of money yourself setting up your internal systems, investing in hardware, servers and all those things, you can basically rent out that space from some other provider. Okay, like even in the hosting industry, what used to happen in the past is most people used to have what you call as a dedicated server. Okay, so they would invest in a dedicated server, which will cost them around anything between $1,000 to $3,000 a month. And as the business used to go up or down, they still had to pay the same amount. But now, thanks to cloud hosting, you don't have to have that fixed cost every month. You can decide on, based on what your load is going to be, you take only that much of power, space or bandwidth. So your monthly cost could drastically go down. One of the other biggest advantages of being on a cloud environment is that your information is not stored on a single point. Like, let's say in your office, if you have a single server, and if that server goes down for some reason, when your IT person comes back and tries to restore the whole thing, that can take anything from 24 hours to even 3 or 4 days. Imagine how much of damage that can do to your business. But if all that applications that you have is sitting in a data center, okay, or is on a cloud, then that information might be mirrored across couple of different locations or couple of different servers. So even if one server goes down in that cloud environment, okay, there are other servers which will actually have the same kind of information, so it doesn't affect your business continuity. You will still get all the information that you need. So now let's look at what what can cloud computing actually do for your business, or how can you take benefit of cloud computing. Okay, normally when you have there are many services you would require. Like if you have a trading company, you would have your accounting system like MYOB and so on. If you have a sales team, you would have a CRM system. If you have a support center, you would have a ticketing system and so on. So you have to understand which part of that business you can actually host it on a cloud. The biggest advantage is that when you host it on a cloud environment, you practically get almost unlimited computing power. That means you're not restricted by the load on your server, because your information doesn't sit on one single server. It gets mirrored across multiple different servers, and that makes your performance much better. Imagine if you had a network of computers within your office and for some reason the speed was slow. Look at the amount of how bad it would be for your staff, where it takes a long time for them to access your database. Take that and put that on the cloud. It's extremely fast. And the reason why that happens is mainly because when you invest in technology within your office, you might buy a server and use local hard drives. When you are on a cloud-based environment, your information is not sitting on a single hard drive. It sits on a storage area network and so on. And not only that, the biggest advantage of using cloud technology is that it's extremely scalable. So you could say, okay, today I have only 5 staff. Maybe in 3 months' time, you would need to have 25 staff. You don't have to worry about investing a lot internally. You simply can go to your cloud provider and say, I need more space, or I need more bandwidth, or I'm adding more users. How do I improve the performance? Okay. It also helps you to scale down if the business situation is not so good. So what cloud computing really does is that it gives you a flexibility on growing your business, or reducing your overheads as and when you proceed. The other greatest thing is that the cost of nowadays the cost of storage has gone down so drastically, as compared to a couple of years back, that most companies or service providers will give you gigs and gigs of storage. So the greatest thing is that you're getting much more reliable storage on a cloud than on a physical hard drive. Physical hard drives in your computer in your office, they have a lot of movable mechanical parts. So there's a strong chance that they could, maybe get corrupted, have bad sectors or whatever it is. That doesn't happen on a cloud, because with cloud, the technology is totally different. The other good thing about on a cloud is that with most businesses, it's important to have your sales data. It could be your CRM system, or your contact management system, whatever you use. The best thing to do is, if you put that on the cloud, it gives you a flexibility for your staff who are mobile, so you don't have to be back in the office. You have access to the information from wherever you are on the road and so on. What also it does is that if you've got multiple locations, rather than having local networks across various offices, you have everything on a cloud, so that anyone and everyone will have access to within the organization. The same goes with the inventory stuff and so on. So if you've got multiple locations, a great thing to do is to have your entire inventory data on the cloud, so it could be accessed by any outlet and so on. So even though you may not have gone in and bought a cloud service from any provider at the moment, but somewhere or the other you still are using that technology, but maybe you're not aware of it, that that's sitting on a cloud. And most importantly, I think the biggest advantage that cloud computing gives to a small business is that it allows you to play around your IT cost, because when you have everything on location within your office, you got a fixed cost of buying equipment, upgrading, maintaining its support and so on. Whereas when you have it on the cloud, you don't really bother about that. All you do is you pay for the amount of resources that you use. And nowadays, what really happens is that accessing your applications or talking to your application in the cloud can simply be done through a simple internet browser. You don't have to be technically sound. It's a matter of putting everything on a web browser, so that anything on the cloud can easily be accessed from any device, whether it's your computer, your laptop, your iPad, or your iPhone. One of the other important things about a cloud-based scenario is that most cloud operators or companies that provide cloud solutions will always provide you what you call as a service level agreement. Okay, which what really means is that practically your service is almost up all the time, and the normal service level agreement across all cloud providers is around 99.95%. Now you compare that with if you had your resources within your office, you can never reach that kind of uptime because there's always issues that could go wrong with your network connection and so on. And also the thing about the way the cloud works is that your data could be anywhere and you can access it from anywhere, so you can actually select that I want to sign up for a cloud service from a local provider or for an overseas provider or whatever it is. But wherever the servers are, most cloud providers would have the right kind of technology in place in such a way that they're highly reliable and they're highly available. As far as you have an internet connection, you would have total access to all your applications and so on. Cloud technology itself has been there for quite some time, but the way we used it is a bit different. Most companies in the past were scared to put things on the cloud and they wanted everything internal. But if you look at the benefits of putting things on a cloud, it's much more important or much more valuable than thinking about having a local network. And that's why even the smallest of accounting softwares like you take MYOB and all are talking about a web-based, cloud-based accounting system. Because that gives you flexibility, it allows you to access information, and it makes sure that you can access it from wherever you want. I just want to make a quick mic check to see that you guys can still listen to me, because the last time I did have a bit of a problem. So is my voice still loud and clear? Okay, great. So when we look at cloud, what we look at is more about, what if you look at getting into a cloud-based environment, the first thing you need to find out exactly what are the applications that you run within your office that you can put on a cloud, or what are the things that can help you reduce your cost. And as we get more and more comfortable putting things on a cloud, you'll find that your IT cost will drastically go down. You don't have to worry about how powerful or how fast the applications in the cloud will be, because on the cloud everything is mirrored and there is proper load balancing done on it. I'm just having a slight problem with the slide again. Just give me 1 minute. Sorry about that. I might need to speak to our webinar providers. Should be back in a minute. One of the good things about most of the cloud providers is that they basically would provide you an end-to-end solution, so you won't have to worry about the server crashing or issues with network connections. Just to give an example, with Netregistry, all our hosting that we provide on a Netregistry is on a cloud environment. We've got any website that sits on a server is sitting on 7 different servers within the cloud. So even if one server goes down, it doesn't affect the customers. Unless the entire, the cloud goes down, there's a different story, but that rarely happens. Okay, I've been with Netregistry for the last 7 years now. In the last 7 years that we've been doing cloud-based hosting, I would say we had a meltdown only maybe twice in the last 7 years, and that also was kind of brought back within no time. As compared to some companies or some hosting providers where services have gone down for not only days but a couple of days and so on. So even if your website, even if you're not putting your application, when you launch a website, it's really important that you're hosting it on a cloud-based environment rather than on a standalone server. And that's where sometimes, when you go to buy web hosting online, you'll find that there are some hosting at $1, and then there are some hosting providers selling at maybe $40 or $50. There's definitely a difference in technology, but the problem is that the person selling you hosting at $1 will not tell you that they are not on a cloud environment. So you can buy a server, put 5,000 customers or websites on one server. It'll work, but the performance will be so slow and it'll be highly unreliable. So the cost of running one server is much lesser than a cost of running 15 servers on a total different cloud network. So most cloud providers, they do the investment, so you don't have to worry about the investment from an IT point of view. All you're doing is you simply going to a cloud server provider and saying, this is the application that I want to host, okay, and I need so much of space, so much of bandwidth, so much of memory, and within a couple of clicks the cloud provider can actually get a server up and running. So what really happens with cloud computing is nothing but there is a large pool of physical servers which get divided into smaller virtual servers using softwares like Amazon or VMware and so on. These are cloud computing softwares that allow physical computers or servers to be divided into virtual smaller servers. So when you go and go to someone to a hosting provider and say, I want a virtual private server on a cloud, what you're actually doing is you're taking a part of the virtual server for yourself. But even that virtual server is a part of the cloud, so even if something goes wrong with that server, there is a mirror image of your web data sitting on another server. So it's kind of always been load balanced. So depending upon where the traffic is coming from, automatically your website will get load balanced from different servers and so on. The other good thing about on a cloud is that your network connection is always up, because most cloud computing networks will not have one single internet service provider. They would have multiple service providers. So in a data center, for example, you would have a internet connection coming from Telstra, from Optus, and maybe a third provider overseas. So even if Telstra goes down, there's always Optus and the third provider. So that's the biggest advantage of cloud. But imagine if you're within your office and if your office network goes down, you're kind of disconnected from the outside world. And the good thing about when you select on your cloud provider, you can actually select where your where do you want your data and your servers to reside. So that's a kind of flexibility. Some cloud computing solutions have got multi-locations, have got disaster recovery solutions and so on. So based on how critical your information is, you can select on what kind of setup do you need. So with a small business environment, what normally happens is that, you can say, okay, right now the only thing that I want to have web-based access to would be a website. So you might start with maybe putting a website on a cloud. The next thing you would say is that, I've got a lot of salespeople who are always on the road, and I want to make sure that they can update their reports, they can do everything. Rather than them coming back to the office, I want them to do it from wherever they are. So you might put in your CRM system on the cloud. Then you could put your accounting system in the cloud. So, as you move on, as your business grows, you can, start putting things on the cloud. And not only that, if for some reason, your business takes a step back, or you're planning to cut cost or whatever it is, then you can simply go back and reduce your exposure on the cloud to saying, I only want so much of resources. So it gives you the flexibility, which unfortunately you can't do within your office. Once you invested in the hardware and servers and workstations and all those stuff, you still have to use it. What's amazing with cloud is that the speed that you can get it. Okay, now I think for the last couple of minutes I've been talking about all the benefits of what cloud computing does, but definitely every technology would have some kind of limitations. So let's look at what is the problem we have today with cloud computing. Okay, now cloud computing in terms is relatively new technology. We had things sitting on servers, but things have changed a bit. So the problem with cloud computing to look at is a couple of things. It may or may not be relevant to your business, but it all depends upon what it is. One of the problem with cloud computing is that because the technology is kind of fairly new in terms of application hosting and service as a platform. Okay, there are some limitations which you'll only come to know once you started putting things on a cloud. For instance, there could be a lot of software that you're using at the moment which is not web ready or cannot be put on a cloud. So the challenge with that is you either have to rewrite the entire cloud software for the cloud and so on. Not only that, there are very few major players who can build a massive infrastructure. So some of the ones are Amazon, VMware, and so on. So there are very few large cloud players in the market. And I guess definitely someone like Google. Google is one of the biggest cloud platforms because everything you can do is on a cloud. Gmail is on a cloud, Google Places, you're using Google Chat, everything is on a cloud. And also there are a lot of softwares which are are written to run on local computers and not on a cloud. So that's another challenge today which you face with cloud computing. And one of the other things which is quite an issue with cloud is security. Because you're putting everything on a cloud and you don't have much control. So there's always a fear factor. Is it secure? When I'm putting everything in my cloud, what if somewhere your data gets accessed by someone else and so on. So one of the biggest limitations today in the cloud is security and how safe it is to put things on the cloud. And I think that's the reason why most businesses have been extremely slow in adapting the cloud-based technology. Okay, and not only that, I guess the other problem with the cloud is that the servers are not sitting physically in your computer in your location, so it's sitting on the web on a cloud, in a data center somewhere where you don't have access. So you feel that you don't have control. You can't simply go walk into a desk and reboot the server or change the hub or whatever it is. So there are a couple of issues with regards to how do you control it. But again, if you measure the benefits and the downsides, there could be not so much of, apart from the security issue. I think everything else will help you save money and work much better. So if you look at how do you start getting yourself on a cloud environment, is the best thing to see, okay, what is the kind of information that you can put on a cloud. You can start very simple things. You can start putting your files, your data on the cloud. Like Google Docs is a good example of how you can share a Word document, an Excel document, or whatever across the web, so multiple people can work at the same time on that document or edit the document and so on. So it has got its benefits. It all depends upon how your organization is structured. You know, we've already are comfortable putting our website on the cloud, our e-commerce store, you know, and it has actually worked, you know, so it's not that it doesn't work. Everything you look at, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, okay, these are all examples of, you know, cloud computing. They are nothing but applications sitting in the cloud and all the users, end users, accessing it via a web browser. And you'll be surprised by the number of people, you know, who actually access these applications, you know, and the amount of times people go online and look for it. And imagine such a big thing or such a large server is practically managed by maybe by one technical person, you know, and there are practically 1 million users. Now you cannot definitely have that in an office environment. If you're in an office and you've got, like, you know, more than 1,000 computers, you can't have one system admin person. You need to have 4 or 5 of them. Imagine if tomorrow, you know, there's a new version of Office or whatever it is. You need to go on and sort on each and every computer. It's such a painful process. But imagine if that application was just sitting on the cloud. You only update it once and everyone accessing it will get the updated version. Okay, so when you look at there are also what you call as different kinds of clouds, you know. So we got something called as a public cloud. A public cloud is which is practically open to everyone and so on. So something like Gmail is a public cloud. Then you got organizations like the banks who will have their own private cloud. So what they do is that they have a private cloud where it's got limited access. Not everyone can access it. It's only their community or their customers and so on. So depending upon the kind of business onto, you would look at, you know, what kind of clouds do I look at, or where do I put my website on and so on. Okay, so now let's look at what's the difference between cloud hosting and cloud computing. Cloud hosting is where you actually put your applications, you know, like a website or whatever, you know, on a cloud. Cloud computing is where you actually do the processing on the on the web. So it's kind of they have the similar concept, but the outcome is a bit different. When you do cloud hosting, what you're doing is you're designing a website, hosting it on a server which is sitting on a cloud. So that means you've got highly reliable website. You have practically no downtime. So imagine if you have a website and if it's sitting on a single server with a hosting provider, and if for some reason that server goes down, or for some reason that server's hard drive fails, then your website is down. And by the time that company would take time to replace the hardware, put in the new operating system, it'll be a couple of hours. So, but imagine if your website was sitting on a cloud hosting environment, you know, then you will not face that situation. Okay, even if one server goes down, it doesn't affect your business. And that's really important, because imagine if you run a business and most of your business depends upon your website. Okay, if your website goes down for some reason, the web hosting provider doesn't really come back to you and say your website is down. Okay, and nor can you really do anything about it unless they bring it up again. So imagine someone trying to reach your website, they come to your website and your website is down. They're more likely to go somewhere else. Okay, there's no way they can come back to you and say, I tried to buy from you, but unfortunately your website was down. So even if you feel that, you know, you're not ready to host your applications, okay, you think about your website, you know, where would you host your website? Would you host it on a single server, or would you host it on a cloud? Because if you host it on a cloud, the benefit is that your website is sitting on a bunch of servers, not a single server. And quite often it does happen, because sometimes, you know, you go to a website and it takes an extremely long time to load up. when that happens, you feel extremely annoyed. So you either hit the back button or go somewhere else. Now imagine if 50% of your customers fall into that category where they find your website is extremely slow. Then they're more likely not to buy from you and go somewhere else. Okay, or even if you put yourself, if you're going to do something online, and when you're doing it online, if it's going to take an extremely long time, you become extremely impatient and you say, this is taking too long, I'll do it somewhere else, and it never happens. Okay, so if you have a website and if it's already hosted, okay, a good thing to see is what's the the load time, how quickly does my website load. If it's taking a lot of time, then you got to make sure that you got to relook at where you're hosting your website. Okay, because there's a price difference between buying hosting from a non-cloud environment as compared from a cloud hosting environment. But end of the day, if paying another $10 or $15 more in a month, if your website is going to work 24/7 without any kind of performance issue, I think it's a worthwhile investment. And not only that, nowadays more and more people use a mobile handset like an iPhone to browse the internet. And with an iPhone, we are extremely more impatient. So you click on something, wait for the website to come up. If it doesn't open up in the next 5 seconds, you're more likely to hit the back button and go somewhere else. Okay, and I think that's what's happened. Like in the last couple of years that we've been using the internet, it's changed a lot. We become extremely impatient. That's because the speed of connectivity is increased. We used to have dial-up connections where we were used to waiting for a couple of minutes for things to load up. Now we're basically sitting on ADSL2, so we become more impatient. So the way we look around information is become in such a way that if things don't come on your screen pretty quick, you hit the back button and go somewhere else. So you got to think about then, how much of that would damage your business. If your website is loading a bit slower than what other websites do you think your customers will wait for that long time? So if you look at what is different with a cloud hosting network is that, if let's say if you're going to a website today, and if the website is sitting on a cloud, then you get served from any of the servers. That's because that website is sitting on maybe 8 different servers. So the moment you send in a request through your browser, information is sent across. So what it really does is that on a cloud environment, everything is mirrored and clustered. So information gets sent across practically quickly, and there's no issue of waiting for your connection to go and connect to a server and get information. Now this gets more and more important if you have an e-commerce store because when you have an e-commerce store, you would have multiple products, and every product that someone is looking at is a different request. So that means there's a database that sits on your e-commerce store. Now imagine if that database is overloaded, because if it's not on a cloud, then you could have 5,000 people accessing the same database, which will take an extremely long time. Okay, and as compared to someone's website sitting in a cloud where the database itself is mirrored again. So there's an issue with performance, and I think this is one of the factors even Google looks at today. Okay, now Google looks at optimizing website. That means if you're looking at optimizing your website, one of the factors that Google ranks website on is your load time, or how quickly does your website load. Because Google is concerned about the user experience. So if Google is going to recommend a website, and if that website is going to take time to load, then it might as well not recommend that website, because the person who's using Google is going to get annoyed with Google. So Google wants to make sure that the websites that come up on the first page of Google, all of them have a good load time. That means they load up quickly. And you can see yourself, if you have already installed Google Analytics on your existing website, have a look at your load time. See how quickly your website would load up, and then look at your bounce rate on your analytics. You see how many people come to your home page, leave from your home page. It's got a lot to do with how quickly information gets displayed on the other end. So what's really happening is that we are practically going away from private data centers, and most of the informations are going back onto a cloud. So this is the future moving ahead. You're going to spend basically more and more time investing on technologies that can be based on a cloud, and that makes more sense because then you're not paying for the IT infrastructure. You're only paying for the resources that you use, and that's what is going to make a difference. So if you look at how we've changed, in the early 1970s, we used to have what you call as a mainframe, where you had a mainframe computer and you had kind of dumb terminals where no processing happened on the computer. It all happened on the server. Then we realized that, that's a huge investment for small or medium-sized companies. So that's where we went on to the client server system, where you've got one server and you got a couple of other workstations that would connect across and share information, and the processing has moved from the server to the desktop level. But moving forward, now we're talking about going on putting everything on the cloud. So whatever you have, you put that on the cloud, and then things would basically serve up quickly. It's easy to deploy your new solution, easy to upgrade yourself, downgrade yourself, whichever way you want to go. And basically that's the future. Everything we're talking about today, and that's why there's so much of talk around things on a cloud, or why you're looking at cloud computing and so on. So one of the biggest advantages of on a cloud hosting is that it's the reliability. For sure that if the only reason your website would ever go down if the entire cloud has gone down, okay, which is kind of much lesser than unlikely compared to having a single standalone server and sec. Next, and the most important thing is the scalability option. Now in the past, when if you had a dedicated server and for some reason you wanted to increase your performance, you had to really invest in a new server, set up a new server. It was a huge investment. Today with cloud computing, whether it's cloud hosting or whatever it is, it's so simple to move from one level of resources to another level of resources. So the speed at which you can scale up your operations is amazing. And not only that, the biggest advantage about cloud hosting is that the complete online service, where you can access it remotely through a browser. And that's what makes it really important, that you could be anywhere, you're not stuck to a physical location. One of the reasons why people still love to use email accounts like Google, Yahoo and so on is that it gives you access wherever you are, and that's the beauty of it. So the same thing goes, imagine if your entire office was a mobile office. Okay, you had so much flexibility that you're not stuck to a location. And on the other side, you talk about what are the issues with cloud computing. Is the biggest issue, as I said, is that the security part of it, because once you're on a cloud, it's no more a physical location. Okay, so there's always an issue about how secure is my data. Okay, but again, I think we've kind of learned a couple of years back, maybe 5-6 years back, everyone was hesitant to put a credit card on the internet. You always felt it was not secure, but now we kind of understood that technology is safe. It's safe for people to put in credit cards, and we do 90% of actually use credit card online. We find it much more easier. Imagine if we did not trust the web and we said, oh, we don't want to pay by credit card. What was the other option? Are you going to physically walk into the store, or you're going to go to the post office, do a bank transfer, it just becomes more and more, painful, and you rather, take a little bit of risk to get that flexibility. The other thing also is that, not necessary that everything can be put on a cloud. So if you got an application, you need to speak to a cloud hosting provider and say, okay, I've got this software or I've got this application, will it work on a cloud? If it doesn't work on a cloud, then you're in trouble, because then, maybe the way you've designed the website doesn't really solve the problem. But then if you weigh out whatever it is, you got to look at, from a small business point of view, what are the advantages? So maybe it's a good thing to sit down and say, okay, what are the costs that I can reduce if I go on a cloud? What are the softwares that I can put on the cloud? And how much of how much of money would I save if I don't have to have internal technical resources? Can that be put on a cloud? Can that reduce my costs of investment and so on? What also is important, and this is what most businesses fail to understand, is that it's just not about, people don't just come to a website when they're planning to make a purchase. Nowadays, people come to a website while making a purchase. So that means before selecting a supplier or for where they want to buy from, time is spent on a website. Once they buy the product, they're more likely to go back to your website and find for, maybe a user guide or frequently asked questions or some, post sales issues. They would like to access that. And so not only is your website critical that it's up and running properly for attracting new customers, it's also important to make sure that once they bought information, if they need any further help, they're going to go back to your website. So it's really important that you make sure that the user experience, the customer experience is much better, because if a customer likes your website or the information that you provide them, they're definitely going to recommend it to others, and that's where you're going to get your word of mouth business as such. So just in a short, what can you really host? You can host a website, you can host a CRM software, you can host accounting packages, you can host your files or remote and get remote access to it. And some of the real big examples are, you can have a hosted Microsoft Exchange. Your emails could be on Google. Salesforce is a hosted CRM solution. ePages is an hosted e-commerce solution. Reach Accounting is a hosted, accounting system. So, and you'll be surprised. For example, if you take something like MYOB, which might cost you around, let's say, $1,200 a year. Something like Reach Accounting would cost you maybe $15 a month. So there's a huge saving, in terms of, and plus the advantage is that you could have multiple users. You don't have to pay for every user, and so on. And I think there's a big shift with people moving away from using things like MYOB onto hosted accounting system, because you'll save a lot, you have flexibility, you can work from wherever you are, as compared to going back to your computer, trying to do your all your accounting and so on. So if you look at what's happening with the future of hosting, we basically are graduating, so we've moved across from just putting our website, our emails on a cloud, or hosting our emails, hosting our website. Now we're talking about hosting our entire infrastructure. So everything to do with your office, documents, whatever you do, your accounting system, and so on. So, and that's where the entire focus is all about. It's all about, what can I put on the cloud? There are different models of cloud delivery model. Now, don't want to get too technical, but we always are used to something like a software as a service. We call it as SaaS. That's been there for quite some time. Where what you're really doing is that you put all your softwares on the cloud and you can access it from there. Now, from software as a cloud, the next level up we're going to is called as a platform as a service. A platform as a service is where you've got tools and applications that are on a cloud. And then finally, the next stage up is what we call as infrastructure as a service. So that means your entire infrastructure of your office or whatever, everything from your operating system, your application server, database, everything can be put on a cloud. So I mean, that's where most businesses are going to. So that's why you'll see that today everything from you do, like your banking system that you have, is much more advanced than what it used to be a couple of years back. I'm pretty sure there's a bit of an upload or a big transfer about cloud computing today. Unfortunately, there are no tools that I can provide you, because this is more about having a proper understanding about what cloud can do. If you have any questions about how you can adapt cloud computing, or what can you do and to improve your performance, or whatever it is, feel free to send me an email. I'm happy to help you out. If you have a website and you feel that you want to know where you're hosted, or whether you need to be on a cloud, again, feel free to contact me. Or if you want a copy of the presentation, again, shoot me an email and I should be able to send you a copy of the presentation. Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. I hope it made a bit of sense, and hopefully see you next time.